salt has flavor, and salt is also preserves.
Right.
So you are the one that will enable other human beings to taste what the kingdom of heaven is like, just by how you live.
Yeah.
Because if you're manifesting mercy in our society, if you're manifesting, meekness in our society instead of strife and turmoil, and you're seeking to be a peacemaker, that's huge.
Hey, I'm Nathan, and I want to welcome you back to the Loveshaped Life podcast, where our dream is to see, experience, and live in the center of God's radical love. I'm here with my friend Bob, and we are ready for season 6, which is a follow-up to season 5, which, by the way, if you have not listened to season 5, you should go back and listen or watch to season 5. It is the lead up to season 6, which we're beginning right now. Would love to invite you to like and subscribe, share with a friend. We think that we're going to continue providing inspiration for your life. And as we invite you to see Jesus and God in all their incredible beauty. And so we'd like you to follow along.
Hey, it's exciting to be here with you again, Nathan. It's always a joy to come together to be able to communicate the beauty of who God is. That's our passion, both of our passions. And it's such a need in the world today for people to see the true God and really what he's like, that he is love and that you are loved by him.
Right. So today we're coming in after, so season 5, we spent time with these words of Jesus that are found in the first few lines of what's commonly called the Sermon on the Mount, or what we're calling Jesus' Kingdom Manifesto. Even the other day, we were preparing for the episode and we were just dialoguing, how should we refer to this extended teaching that Jesus does? Because in the recorded history of Jesus, there were 4 writers, 3 of them who spent time with Jesus. Matthew, Mark, and John all spent time with Jesus. They knew him personally. But then there is a 4th writer, Luke, who did not know Jesus. Well, he wasn't in the original disciples, so he may have encountered Jesus, but he comes along and writes a 4th account of Jesus, a 4th biography. So these biographies in Christian circles, theological circles, are called the 4 Gospels. And so Matthew is traditionally the first of those in Scripture. And that's the one that records this sermon. There's actually, or this teaching, whatever we're going to call it, there's another long form, and that's in chapter 23 of Matthew. There's chapter 24, 25. So there's a few of these sections, as well as other Gospels, that have like these extended teachings of Jesus. And this one provides us a window into his thinking about what it means to be part of his kingdom. And it comes pretty early in his public ministry, which maybe we should talk about for a second. Because he's like in his 30s, right?
Yeah, in his young 30s.
Right. He grew up, was a kid at home, worked with his dad, as far as we know. And then in his 30s, he was baptized and stepped out into the public stage. So there's this quiet, rural, probably village life of Jesus, where most of his life is spent in the background at home. And, maybe some travel, but he's not like this well-known figure until after his baptism, a little bit leading up to his baptism, but pretty much at his baptism, the recognition begins. And it's just this very short, very public ministry is essentially the core of these biographies of Jesus, the Gospels, as they're commonly called.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned, this was his first time out, as far as publicly speaking to a large crowd.
Yeah.
And there was an anticipation there. People were expecting the Messiah to come. And in their mind, the Messiah was somebody who was going to deliver them from the Roman Empire, that they would no longer be slaves. Because at that time, remember, Israel were taken captive by the Roman Empire. So they were slaves to them. So there was this anticipation in that very first manifesto, as you would call it, right? Jesus coming, that the crowd was coming, anticipating that he was going to announce how he was going to conquer the Roman Empire. And there was many people there, because there was a lot of people there that were full of hatred. There was a lot of, expectation. They just couldn't wait to see the Roman Empire destroyed and that they would become the rulers. So in that crowd, it's interesting to look at that crowd who was there, because there were largely the crowd was made up of the Jews from, they were from the nation of Israel. It was largely made up of that crowd, but there was also some Roman soldiers, right, that were present in that crowd. And then there was the religious leaders, which was known as the Pharisees and Sadducees. They were there, they were present, but there was also people from surrounding towns that were not necessarily of a Jewish descent that came out just because they heard that he was about to make a big announcement.
Right. And that was part of the challenge of this. When Jesus launches his ministry, he is launching into just kind of a political fervor that was kind of boiling under the surface of the Jewish people, because they were longing for a deliverer figure, a Messiah figure, or Mashiach figure in their theology. They found it present. The Hebrew prophets had spoken of this. And the experience of being a people in an occupied land, when these are the people whose story is one that begins with deliverance from the Pharaoh of Egypt and includes living as an independent people. And then these writings of the Hebrew prophets predicting a new golden era, in a sense. And so taking all that in, there's plenty of folks in the crowd who sees this new, young, rising teacher, itinerant teacher, who can, as they've come to know, can heal people. His ministry of healing it hasn't reached its full peak, but he has been healing people. He's been doing astonishing things, and the rumors and expectations are inevitable. Even around his baptism, there's rumors that this is a special guy, the John the Baptist figure who dressed like an ancient Hebrew prophet. Really, his introduction of Jesus, the baptism moment, also got the crowds. This was a really, if you think of it, a very pregnant moment of anticipation. The people were looking for a revolutionary figure, and they saw in Jesus somebody who just might be that figure who was the realization, or potentially the realization, of their hopes and dreams.
Yeah, and if you can imagine, there was excitement in the air.
Right.
I mean, that was the anticipation.
Right.
These people, especially the Jewish descent, remember, they were taken captive by the Roman Empire. So here they were. A lot of them owned their own land, and they were farmers. And now they were working actually for the Roman Empire.
Right.
It was taken away from them. Freedom was taken away from them. So there was a lot of oppression. And as a result of that, can you imagine the hope that this man who was coming to speak that day was going to be their deliverer?
Right.
I mean, it was high. And so they were excited. So Jesus comes along. You remember from our last episode, he comes along. The very first thing out of his mouth was, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Right? So he talks about a kingdom, because that's what they're anticipating, a kingdom.
Right.
But his initial response is, "Blessed are those poor in spirit. Blessed are those who see their need."
Right.
Right? Because theirs is the kingdom. So all of a sudden, their anticipation of this earthly kingdom that was going to destroy the Roman Empire is just kind of blown. Right? He starts off just blowing it away, and he flips it into a spiritual kingdom.
As we're thinking about this, and as I was listening, I'm reminded kind of today, the stuff going on in today's culture. I was just I work in the healthcare setting, the healthcare industry, as a chaplain in spiritual care. And was just reminded in a conversation the other day about the disparity that's present in society. People making more and more, people making less and less, people kind of being squeezed out of the middle, where in the area we're from, it's hard for someone to make just an everyday salary and be able to afford their own home. Mm-hmm. So even today, culturally, we're in a place where there's also kind of unrest, certain people not receiving, their needs aren't being met. The society is pushing them to the sidelines. So we are in this place in some ways in society where people are struggling to be valued and to afford to live, to find a house, to those things that make life worth living. If you don't have those things and they're not easy to get or reasonably achievable, that starts formulating or creating an unrest and looking for something to come along that can fix this. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why the constant web and flow of political leaders, right? Because everybody's looking for a messiah who's going to give them what they're desiring, maybe a better economy. Right. And, there's always these hopes and dreams and that oftentimes don't even come to fruition. Right. So here they are, they have these hopes and dreams, and Jesus starts off talking about his kingdom, but not in the aspect of an earthly kingdom. And remember from our last episode, then he goes on and he just mentions really characteristics of citizenship of the kingdom, right? Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine? He just let the air out of the balloon, in the crowd.
Yeah,
Because he wasn't saying, blessed are those who are strong and mighty and going to be able to swing a sword better than somebody else, And he said, no, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers. So he just flips this kingdom. It's a powerful moment.
It's very powerful.
And so that's where we were in the last episode. And now today we're picking up from where we left off.
Yes.
Right?
And so if you're following, again, these biographies of the life of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're named after their authors. And Matthew writes the first one. And each book is divided into chapters if you're not familiar with Scripture. So we're in chapter 5. This teaching moment of Jesus is recorded in chapters 5, 6, and 7. So this season, we're finishing up chapter 5. Last season, season 5, we started chapter 5. If you heard last season, you'll recognize some of the dialogue because we kind of recapped a little bit of that conversation about who's present, what's the political climate. But if you haven't listened to season 5, you need to, because it sets the stage for this teaching that we're going to get into today, sets the stage for in a very powerful way. Yeah. So there's 3 parts to chapter 5, 3 kind of general sections. The first one we covered in season 5, which are commonly referred to as the Beatitudes. They're depending on how you divide it, 7 to 9 words of blessing that Jesus gives, and very powerful. That's season 5. Watch that. The next section sets the stage for the third section in chapter 5. And so today we're talking about that middle section that sets the stage for the last section. And that section, if you're looking chapter-wise, is Matthew 5, 13 through 20. So a handful of scriptures, of verses as we call them in reference to the Bible. That is this transition piece, setting the stage for the next piece of Jesus' teaching.
Yeah, before we read that, I just want to mention again about he's talking about a kingdom, right? They were expecting a kingdom, only they were expecting an earthly kingdom. And now he's talking about the spiritual kingdom, right? Who he's really the king.
Right.
And oftentimes in the Gospels, you'll see as Jesus traveled around, he would say things like, the kingdom of heaven is like. He's trying to find something to compare the kingdom of heaven like. And he never compared it to an earthly kingdom.
So, and I think that's like the kingdom of heaven. We as pastors, because that's our background, kind of take for granted that language is uncommon language outside of kind of a theological setting or a church setting. It's also true that even in Jesus' time, as he's introducing himself to the people, introducing these ideas to the crowds, that language is a little foreign too. What is a kingdom? They knew that Rome had a kingdom.
Right.
They knew other kingdoms in the area. They heard about the wars, been involved in the wars. Soldiers were in the crowd. So they understood kingdom.
Yeah.
But then Jesus adds this little, if I remember my English right, adverbial phrase of heaven. So it's a kingdom, but it's a different kind of kingdom. It's a heavenly kingdom.
Yeah.
So, as you're listening, part of what we're doing is trying to communicate in language you can wrap our minds around these ideas of Jesus. And one of those is he's also doing this work of what does it mean to be of heaven? We get the kingdom side. Yeah. What's the of heaven part?
Well, actually the kingdom, but back to the kingdom side. Sorry, I'm stuck on the kingdom side.
That's good.
You remember, he couldn't find an earthly kingdom because earthly kingdoms are built on force.
Right.
Roman Empire was ruling the people by force. But the kingdom of heaven now, the most powerful being in all the universe that can actually rule by force. Just by the blink of an eye, he could make all of us bow down. He's not using force to establish his kingdom.
Right. And that's the adverb, that modifying phrase is so critical, the of heaven. That changes everything. The kingdom word means something entirely different once you add the of heaven part.
Very good. Very good. So this kingdom that he's seeking to establish, as we saw last time, is talking about mercy and compassion.
Right.
These are characteristics of God, right? So these are the characteristics that he's saying would be seen in the citizens of the kingdom.
Right.
Right? So if you can imagine the most powerful being in all the universe who can exercise power and might in the snap of a finger, doesn't. Instead, he's establishing his kingdom on freedom and the power of love.
You and I are church guys, like that's our background is church. And
I'm not sure if I'm a church guy, but you can say
that's like our background.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of our audience, we come from that background. Yep. And what strikes me is the tragedy that you and I have seen on the inside. We see it in media. We hear about it in church circles, is that too often the church, rather than following the lead of Jesus, has itself tried to leverage theology, that's scripture teachings, ideas about God, etc., to establish itself in society, to control its adherents, to try to dominate the political landscape. Jesus is not introducing us to that either. In fact, Jesus is coming head on to dismantle that system and say, this is garbage, and it does not represent who I am.
Sure. Any religious body who attempts to go after a political government in order to establish itself just demonstrates that they have no power.
Yes.
Because Jesus' kingdom was built on love, and that love is the power to transform human hearts. And that's what he's trying to get across in this first manifesto, right? As he's establishing his kingdom and setting up his kingdom, that these attributes that he's saying the citizens would have are the power. That's why what we're about to read right now, in fact, maybe we should.
We probably should, or we'll finish the podcast before getting to the text.
Would you like to read it?
I will read it. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I'm going to stop there. That's not the full section, but I think I'm going to stop there.
That's good.
we want to kind of break that down. That's a lot of text. We think you need to hear it in one piece, but then we're going to kind of break it down and explore some of these pieces.
Yeah, and remember, he's coming out of talking about the attributes of the kingdom, like we talked about, right?
Right.
Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, blessed are the pure in heart. And now he tells them, he's looking at this crowd, right, who's waiting for him to set up this earthly kingdom to conquer the Roman Empire. And he says, you are the salt of the earth.
And we really spent some time as we were talking about this episode on that idea, you. Because he's looking at people who, the poor.
Yeah.
Individuals on the mountainside who...
They were slaves.
Right. Slaves. Others who weren't necessarily slaves, but who every day was a struggle to make sure they had enough food to make it to the next day. We call that hand to mouth, like where they were, every day was a struggle just to keep existing. They had no place in a kingdom. Nobody
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, nobody wanted them in Messiah's army as it would be conceived of in a political. They were not heroes. They were not, all the things you might need. They were just the outcasts on the side of the road of society.
Well, many of them felt worthless because the religious concept at the time was they were pretty much implied and taught that they were worthless. So here they are, these people, and Jesus speaks to them, you are the salt of the earth. Same thing he's speaking to human beings today. You are the salt of the earth.
Right.
You are of value in the eyes of God. You are a change maker. Salt, remember, salt has flavor, and salt is also preserves. Right? So you are the one that will enable other human beings to taste what the kingdom of heaven is like, just by how you live. Because if you're manifesting mercy in our society, if you're manifesting, meekness in our society instead of strife and turmoil, and you're seeking to be a peacemaker, that's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge. Who does that?
And that's what we want you to hear. It's one of the things we've talked about is this concept that kind of floats around in society, that the church is this place where theological ideas and doctrinal rules matter. Like that's what makes a church a church. That's what makes a person a follower of Jesus. When what Jesus is saying is actually the thing that makes you a follower of Jesus is hungering to be a person who loves well, is showing mercy. Like Jesus, instead of naming a list of things or religious practices you engage in, he names who a person is, what a person is like. His emphasis is on how we treat the people around us.
Yeah, later on, Jesus made it real simple. And that's what I like about Jesus' teaching, real simple. He said, "A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And by this shall all men know that you are my disciples."
Right.
That wasn't a particular label from any type of organization that you belong to.
Right.
It was how you lived.
That's
it
right.
It was who you were. And it was the type of love that he had. That he wants to put in us. And that's the identifying mark.
That
we're citizens of this kingdom. And that's the salt that he wants us to flavor the earth with. That's the salt. They might see God in us.
Right.
That the same Jesus that they were seeing would be seen in them.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's incredible.
And he said, you broken individuals, you people who are broken, and you're down and out, and you're trodden underfoot by oppression. You are citizens of the kingdom if you will allow me to live in you.
Right.
That was mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing. And the idea that it's not, that followers of Jesus aren't the people who show up in church, but the people who show up in radically loving their neighbors, their families, their community. That's what, according to Jesus, those are the people who are really, truly part of the kingdom.
Well, those are the ones he's identifying as the citizens of the kingdom.
Right.
Again, it's not labels. It's about who we are.
Yes.
In God's eyes, it's about who we're becoming.
Yes.
Right? And what he's doing in our lives, in our heart and life. So back to salt, right? Salt was used for flavoring. Salt was used for preserving, right?
Yes.
So God is calling upon every individual who's choosing to be part of this kingdom to be that agent of change in our world.
Yeah.
So love will conquer hatred. If you want to be an agent of love, you can be used in the hands of God to conquer the hatred that's in the world.
Right. When I am connecting with people, I pick up on this longing in the hearts of my friends, my coworkers, regardless of religious background, no religious background, burned out on church, no familiarity with Jesus, etc., like all over the map. One common thread that keeps showing up is a desire to be a person who contributes goodness to the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something so important to highlight. Like, that's what Jesus is after. He's not after the show and the performance. So much of that is what turns people off. They experience religion as this hollow kind of, or can experience, not that like every religious experience is this way, but so much of religious experience is kind of a hollow performance. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is very clearly pushing back against that picture of religion. He's also introducing something else that is substantively different.
Mm-hmm. We have these friends that visit us every year. They come back every year, but they don't live in our house when they come to visit. They actually live in the mailbox post outside. So there's these two birds. They're bluebirds. They come back every year. And it's like a GPS signal that God's put in their heart, that they know where the place is. They just show up every spring. Mm-hmm. And I want to fix the mailbox, but I'm not fixing it because I feel like I'm taking their home away, right? So God has put it in their heart to know where to come back every year, to make a nest, to produce more of their babies right there in our mailbox post. Well, there's a GPS signal inside of all of our hearts that's longing for something better. Mm-hmm. And only God can fill that spot. Yeah. So what you're talking about your friends that are longing to be a better person, that's what God's put in our heart.
Right.
And only he can fill that spot.
That's
and
right.
This is what it means. So to find purpose and meaning in life is to be part of the kingdom.
Right.
And experience that it's the little things in life that are helping be the salt, that you are the salt, you are the light, by demonstrating a kind act, by showing a compassion to another human being, by demonstrating mercy, by taking the low road of being meek instead of trying to be above somebody else, trying to be a peacemaker in our world. All these little things that we can do in our workplaces, in our neighborhood, in our home especially, is building the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And being part of a salt that will try to help preserve a society that's on a pathway of destruction. Right?
Yeah. So a couple of things one is I found this incredible. It's a little article from University of Hawaii at Manoa, and it's from science curriculum. Salt plays a crucial role in maintaining human health. It is the main source of sodium and chloride ions in the human diet. Sodium is essential for nerve and muscle function and is involved in the regulation of fluids in the body.
Wow.
There's another article, Time Magazine, this is another online, called A Brief, it was on the time.com website, A Brief History of Salt. Interestingly, salt was so valuable that this post mentions that of all the roads that led to Rome, one of the busiest was the Via Salaria, the salt route over which Roman soldiers marched and merchants drove ox carts full of the precious crystals up the Tiber from the salt pans at ostia. Salt, in some cases, was formed into the shape of a coin. There's another time where salt was trading 1-to-1 for gold.
Wow.
So Jesus was not accidentally, it wasn't like he just picked some random thing out of his head. When he said, "You're the salt," he was tying the impact of kingdom people who were living according to the Jesus way as essential to setting the bar, to preservation of a civilized society. Jesus' followers were not meant to be another sect of people who had a collection of religious ideas and strange practices. They were meant to be people whose lives, not their time at church, not the things they said, as much as the way they lived, was to be an agent of preserving civilness and encouraging civilness. So this salt idea. And what's interesting too, Bonhoeffer makes this comment. Go ahead, and yeah, if you have something, I'm finding
Well,
it
I just
here.
want to, you mentioned about the value of salt, right, to us and to our bodies. Again, the comparing that we are the salt of the earth spiritually for the world, that God has called us to impact and use our influence for him to help people find him and see him and to find life, So there's this flavor that we're adding to the world. There's this
right.
preservation that we're
Right.
adding to the world just through simply demonstrating attributes of God
Right.
in our daily life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
No necessarily big show and pomp and show, just simply living that can be life-changing impact on people's lives. So you're going to read
Exactly.
something from Bonhoeffer?
Yeah, from Bonhoeffer. And just a quick word on Bonhoeffer, which is maybe not a name you're familiar with. This theologian rose to kind of significance in his circle during the rise of Hitler. So Hitler becomes chancellor in 1933. Bonhoeffer is a pastor and theologian at that time. And he is deeply moved by the teachings of Jesus. And for him, the call of following Jesus is a call to a life of radical love. He was unwilling to simply adapt his theology to the empire. He was unwilling to conform simply to be accepted. He was committed to following Jesus at whatever cost that might be. And for Bonhoeffer, it ultimately led to his death. So Bonhoeffer, I think, has an authority to speak to following Jesus that few have, at least from his era, because his life was an active decision to follow at whatever cost. He didn't compromise his faith, his convictions, his beliefs about who Jesus was to be accepted. And so when he speaks, I think there's some power there because his life demonstrated this radical commitment. This is from his book, Cost of Discipleship. And he makes this note. The word speaks, this is the word salt. The word speaks of their whole existence insofar as it is grounded anew in the call of Christ. This idea that their existence, you are the salt. He didn't say what you teach is the salt. He didn't say I'm giving you the salt. He said you as a human being present in the world, you are the salt. So it's not the things we say, it's not the things followers of Jesus say, it's not the things they do as external things. It's the salt as the love of God is embodied in the life of the believer as we live out life filled with the love of God. That is the act of being salt.
Yeah, it's more of being than doing,
Being,
right?
exactly.
It's who you are.
Right.
Is there more to that quote? 'Cause
No, that's enough. No, that's good. No.
So you remember Jesus makes that statement here as he was talking about, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its saltiness, how can it be salty again, right? So remember, the salt that they had was not what we have on our table today.
Not the
It was
white stuff.
Not the white stuff. So it was, we've learned to refine it and make it what it is today. So there was other minerals attached to it, right? So, but if the saltiness wasn't in there,
That's the sodium chloride, that white stuff.
yeah,
If that gets leached out.
right. If it gets leached out, then it was good for nothing,
Right.
right? So what he was saying was, if my love is not in you, right? If I'm not in you, then your salt is good for nothing. All your religious forms and ceremonies and whatever you do is good for nothing.
Right.
Because the bottom line, the salt ingredient, the saltiness is my love.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And what it speaks to me of is, as I watch what's happening in the religious world, sometimes I'm reluctant to call myself a Christian. Not because I have any reservations about following Jesus. I'm fully on board with that. But the Christianity that I see today is essentially, at least the Christianity that shows up in the news most of the time, is a Christianity that is a movement of power and dominance, not a movement defined by these kingdom principles of Jesus, but an organization of people who have certain ideas and want to use their power, their leverage, their weight to drive society in the direction they want to go. It's power and control. This is not what Jesus is talking about. And when he talks about the salt losing its savor, when people who claim to be following Jesus, when love is just kind of disappears from their lives, they have lost their point for existence as people who follow Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus said it's good for nothing. I mean, he didn't hold back, right?
He didn't hold back.
He didn't hold back. Listen, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, just 1 through 3. Listen to what the scripture says. If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but don't love, I'm nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. And then he goes on. He said, if I speak God's word with power, revealing all his mysteries and making everything plain as day, as if I have faith that says to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. And he says, and if I give everything I own to the poor, and even go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, but I don't have love, I've gotten nowhere. So no matter what I say, what I believe, what I do, I'm bankrupt without love. That's the bottom line. That's the salt.
And he names
saltiness
everything.
of the salt, right? Yeah.
Names everything we think of in church.
Yeah.
Working miracles, preaching speaking eloquently from Scripture, making compelling theological arguments, giving. Right? Those are like the core things that we think makes up church. This writer to the early Christians, says, if that's what you think religion is, and there's no love in your life, all of that is a total waste of time. Sacrificial giving is a waste of time.
Yeah.
If love is not the defining reality in my life.
It's the salt, the one God wants to use to change the world.
Right.
So he went on to describe what that love was, right?
But
sorry.
There's one piece that we can interject in the middle of that, and I think it's worth throwing it in here because I want to hear this piece. But this is another writer, John, writing to a group of believers, early church believers, early followers of Jesus. We know we've passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone who does not love remains in death. It's like in John's mind, life and death was the difference between loving and not loving.
And I want to be clear, this love that he's talking about, that John is talking about, is the agape love that we've referred to in previous episodes.
Right.
It's the type of love that is in the heart of God, right?
Yes.
So because the world, we use the word very loosely,
right.
Love, I love you, I love you, I love you. But the type of love that he's talking about is this self-giving, self-sacrificing love, right?
Yes.
So just to be clear on that, that's the love. That's the one, again,
right.
that's found in the heart of God.
Right. And that's the kingdom Jesus is creating, is a kingdom of human beings whose lives are defined by radical love.
And lives that he will infuse that love into.
Yes.
He's not asking us to try to muster it up
Right.
to produce it. He's
Right.
saying, no, I am love. I'm the creator, and I will put it in you, right?
Right.
I'll put it in you.
That's why he says you are people that follow Jesus, whose lives really lean into his love, simply are the salt of the earth. By association with him, they become infused with his love and live it out. Mm-hmm. That's why here at Loveshaped Life, we talk about the 4 principles: see, meditate, accept, and rest, as living in the center of God's love. Because the way we become lovers in the Jesus model is to lean into him. His love transforms us, and that seeps out into everything we do.
And we become the salt.
Right. Exactly.
In our world.
Right.
You know? So what do you want on to say?
Continue. Yes. This is 1 Corinthians, which is written,
right.
Paul, an early church leader, writing to a church in the city of Corinth.
And this is right after what I had just read, right?
Yes.
That if you don't have love, you have nothing. He said, love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love does not strut, doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others, isn't always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep score of the sins of others, doesn't revel when others grovel, takes pleasure in the flowering of truth, puts up with anything, trusts God always looks for the best, never looks back, but keeps going to the end. So he's really defining the type of love that becomes the salt of the earth. And the good news is, this is what Jesus came for. So it was when he's speaking to the people about the kingdom, again, he wants to put that in their hearts, just like he wants to put it in our hearts today, in any human being's heart that is willing to receive it. This is what Jesus came and lived for. This is the human being that he created, a new human being that's capable of loving from this capacity. This is what he died for. And this is how he was resurrected, and he sits at the right hand of the Father, and he's willing to give us that same type of love today.
To make human beings who love like he loves.
That's the good news.
That
is the good news, that we, by his power, are capable of loving like this. So there was those people listening to Jesus that day, thinking that he was going to talk about establishing an earthly kingdom, and he flips it and says, this kingdom's not like the kingdom you think.
Not what you expect.
It's not built on force.
Right.
It's built on love that flows from my heart. And that love is more powerful than any of those carnal weapons, as we would call them.
That's right.
Right? And that love is capable of transforming hearts, even your enemy.
That's right. That's right.
Even the people you're hating can have transformed lives. And that's what he was after.
That's it.
And he's still after the same thing today.
Yeah.
That's what he's calling upon people who are willing to be recipients of that love, to be the salt of the earth.
Yep. And that is all for today's episode, because we're at the perfect spot. To wrap it up, this is going to end up being a 2-parts on this transition piece. Jesus transitioning, setting the stage for where he's going to go. And where he's going is 5 aspects of ancient Hebrew law that Jesus is kind of recapturing, recasting. We're going to get there. We got to wrap up this episode. We're going to come back and finish the transition segment. And then with podcast 3 or episode 3 in this season, we'll get into some of those 5 pieces that Jesus talks about in this radical way of living and loving. So first, like and subscribe, share with a friend. And until next time, lean into the love-shaped life. Thank you so much for tuning into the Loveshaped Life podcast. We hope you find this podcast not only inspirational, but life-changing. Here at Loveshaped Life, we're working to create a community, an online community, in fact, where individuals like you can connect with each other and lean into God's love together.
We also provide spiritual wellness coaching where we walk alongside people to help them to see the beauty of God's character, discover if there's anything that might be hindering them from finding the healing power that's in that love.
And as you might have expected, Loveshaped Life is crowdfunded. Individuals like you give generously to make this dream a reality. If you'd like to join that crowd, you can give today at loveshaped.life.